Welcome to the Grab a Hold podcast. I am your host, Justin S., and we are here to talk about everything wrestling, from reviews to recaps to giving our opinion and just flat out armchair booking all of the pro wrestling that we love. Welcome to episode 2. We are back for round 2. This is going to be covering the Raw after WrestleMania 39 as well as AEW Dynamite from this week. We're going to go ahead and talk about a couple things right off the top. From Monday show, obviously Raw is 3 hours, so it's going to be some stuff to cover, and then we have Dynamite, which is 2 hours. So this will be the regular schedule. We'll have Raw, Dynamite on Thursday's episodes, and then we will have SmackDown, and we'll talk some more about what we see, what we'd like more, and obviously if you guys have comments, if you guys have topics you want to hear us talk about or hear me talk about, we can go ahead and check those out in the comment section. As always, you can find us on Instagram at grab a hold podcast _ after each word. And we are working on the YouTube channel currently right now. So we'll be up there soon enough. If you're listening to us on Riverside, thank you. Also, we are on Spotify. So if you're listening to us on Spotify, thank you. Tell somebody, tell a friend, tell your neighbor, tell anybody. Okay, we're trying to get this up here. So we're going to go ahead and kick off the show with the Raw after WrestleMania. And they recap WrestleMania, obviously making it a big deal. And it's WrestleMania, so it is a big deal. And the show opens with Hunter coming out. They have Triple H come out, and obviously people want to know what this means, the sell means to WWE, and what he means coming out here and doing this promo to the crowd. So he comes out and gives basically a thank you to everybody involved, people behind the scenes, all the wrestlers, the fans, everybody, and says, we're not going anywhere, just like the motto says at the beginning of the show, then, now, forever, together. And leads to bringing Roman out. So Roman comes out and does his entrance as he does. And as he starts to go to say, acknowledge me, and they've been in LA, you got to remember, they've been in LA since Friday. So he's, got to come up with something besides LA, WrestleMania, something. So he goes to say, Hollywood, acknowledge me this time. And as he says it, Cody's music hits, and here comes Cody. He gets to the ring, and we have a face-off and promo between the two. So obviously, Cody's gripe is that, he feels that Solo is the guy that helped put him over the top. That he acknowledges Roman as the better competitor, but says Solo has gotten him a bunch of victories and that he feels like he had him last night. So he wants a rematch. And Heyman does the talking for Roman this time, which is, it's something where you kind of go like, oh, I'd rather see Roman talk, but his facial expressions when Heyman says things are just so spot on. He's, like I said before, he's so locked in. So it gets presented that they want to do no rematch whatsoever. He tells him no way, no how, not tonight, not in Puerto Rico, which is Backlash. I believe it's April or May 6th, I believe, is Backlash. And he says no, says not at all. So Cody tells him, well, I'm not here for your games. I'm not here for your business. And Solo's here and you're here. So why don't we do a tag match? They'd agree to it under 2 conditions. One, it has to be somebody who fought at WrestleMania. And from that condition alone, it kind of took out like, oh, I guess Randy Orton's not coming back for Cody for tonight at least. Obviously, Matt Riddle wasn't there, so it's not Riddle. It became like, okay, well, who does that leave coming out of the weekend for what they had already announced versus who was left outside of that? And the second stipulation was that whoever was his tag team partner would not be allowed to get a shot at the world title until Roman is no longer champion. And no longer did it take for him to say those things, did Brock's music hit, and the crowd went nuts. And if you think back to last August for SummerSlam, that was part of the deal with Brock losing to Roman, was he could no longer challenge for the world title as long as Roman was champion. So it was very fitting. And this is a big match. Cody and Brock as a tag team versus Solo and Roman as bloodline guys, and Solo being Roman's right-hand man now. Um, it had a big feel to it as far as, good guys and bad guys. Everybody has been on the Cody train since he's been back, and obviously Brock is a huge fan favorite. So it had a big deal feel to it. Um, and the funny part with Brock is that now that he's been without Heyman and he's had to do these, promos, or he's had to show up, like, he looks like he's having fun and he looks like he's enjoying himself. And when he shakes Cody's hand, he damn near jerks Cody out of his suit. I mean, he was amped up. He, shaking his hand, holding, Cody holds his hand up in the air, points at him. He does the same to him on the ramp. Super amped up. So this first hour of Raw had no commercials, so they rolled into showing like clips and packages to help transition from things segment to segment. So the next thing was Omos and Elias. It's a quick squash match. It gets Omos back on track in the win column. And I mean, for everything that they had invested in Elias, I mean, how far has he fallen? You know what I mean? To be doing quick squash matches for Omos, I get the attraction that Omos is, but I mean, I think you could have let him sit at home for, a week or two and just said, hey, Brock got me real quick. It wasn't something that he got. He just surprised me and brought him out and make him more of an attraction. Don't let him be seen every single week. I get getting him wins, but at the same time, it's like he's no longer special if you see him every single week. So then it cuts to the Usos in the hallway, and they're going to Roman's locker room. And as they get there, Heyman comes out and tells them, "Hey, you're not needed. Go ahead and go back to the jet. Go ahead and enjoy the food. We're not going to need you." And they're like, "Okay." And they leave. And as Heyman opens the door, he tells Roman, "I took care of it. Don't worry about it." So again, showing some animosity, and some adversity between the bloodline. Again, especially since the Usos lost at WrestleMania. They cuts to Kathy Kelly interviewing Bad Bunny at ringside and reminding everybody that he is the host of Backlash in Puerto Rico. Uh, Rey Mysterio comes out for a promo thanking Bad Bunny for his help and getting involved, and then Theory cuts him off. And Theory comes out and cuts down Cena and puts Cena down, calls him a part-timer, and then goes after Rey. And 30 seconds to a minute into this impromptu match, it goes to commercial. So the first commercial on the show had to happen as soon as the action. Like, I don't understand why, if the Usos are headed back to the jet, why that's not the commercial break. Then come back with the interview for Bunny and the interruption and match with Rey and Theory. So Theory gets the win with the A-Town down. So Rey coming off of a big win over Dom in the story, riding high, and he's got to lose to Theory now. And as soon as, the loss happens, Priest, Dominic are out there jumping him again. It's back at him again. And Dominic rolls out and gets in Bad Bunny's face and is basically telling him things based on him getting involved at WrestleMania. Goes to swing on him, Bunny blocks, throws his own punch, and drops Dom. And if you know when Bad Bunny started and fought, he fought alongside Priest. So Priest and him have some history, so it makes sense that he's involved with him. And he grabs Bad Bunny and pulls him over the guardrail and flips him over, and then eventually puts him through the announcer's table. So it's something where they made a big impact with him right away. Unfortunately, the bump looked pretty bad because Bunny went down and rolled over his shoulders and neck. It didn't look like he got hurt, but it definitely looked like he wasn't ready to take that the way that the table breaks. And I mean, I'm sure it's awkward to get through. Then they had the tag team champions, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Street Profits. Solid. I mean, I like KO and Sami being the champions. I don't mind the Street Profits as a tag team, but I feel like this started to show what reports came out later as far as where the creative direction is or possibly heading. And every time I see Montez Ford do certain things, and not even just from an athletic standpoint, but from a visual standpoint of when you look at somebody as who's a guy that can be somebody of importance in the WWE as a superstar, Montez Ford looks like he can be that guy as an individual. He's clearly athletic. The guy can jump out of the building. That's not even a question. But the idea of what he looks like, and I'm not knocking Dawkins. They did the spot with him and Strowman at Mania where he lit him up off the shoulder tackle, which was great spot. But if you're looking at who quote unquote is the Sean and who's the Marty as far as the Rockers go, it looks like Ford Sean, and it's just a matter of when. When do you pull the trigger on Ford being a single star? Because I feel like with the Street Profits in this match too, I mean, like I said, it's solid, but I feel like we've seen it. I feel like we know what they do. We know what they can do together. So it's like where are we going to go with this? Because obviously Sami and Kevin aren't losing the titles right now. So this match should have been a good match, solid. But the Street Profits, it's like, yeah, I mean, we know that they can deliver, but they're just another tag team right now. Um, so then Seth comes out with the microphone in his hand. He sings his song. It goes to commercial. He comes back and he's conducting with his arms and then goes away. There's been things online showing video of him talking to production people. Like there's been things said that it possibly has changed throughout the show, that there was a creative change and that possibly that his segment was either cut completely or that they decided, hey, we're shortening this up. And so don't worry about it. You were going to talk, but don't worry about it. We just want to see you do the whole thing with the crowd. Which is unfortunate. I mean, that was a big match that delivered at WrestleMania, and him coming off of that, like it was important to see what he does next, because Logan's not a full-time guy. Logan Paul's not a guy who is on the regular. So to be able to see what Seth's direction is and what happens to him is important as, one of the guys that's in the upper echelon of the card and as a superstar. Bronson Reed confronts Bobby Lashley, and Bobby Lashley has open challenge type deal, and Bronson Reed passes on the match. Ali gets involved and says, don't take no for an answer. You got to be more positive. Lashley squashes him quickly. I mean, I feel bad for Bobby Lashley. It's one of those things where there's been multiple reports online that when the stuff with Bray fell through, that it just kind of went straight down from there. And then there was also supposed to be allegedly a deal where he was supposed to have some sort of segment with LA Knight or an impromptu match, almost like an open challenge there. And that didn't happen either. So, I mean, I feel bad. He came out and posed, and that was it. And from there, and then now it's like, okay, he gets a squash match with Ali. I mean, I feel like he's another guy that you're kind of missing the ball here. I mean, he had something with Brock. They do a quick one off where the low blow situation with Brock, and then he's gone, and then it just all falls apart. And maybe that's bad timing. Maybe that's just the situation. But I feel like he's another guy that they're missing on. Bianca Belair is out for a promo, gets interrupted by Rhea Ripley. So both female champions of Raw and SmackDown, they get together. Bianca talks about, wanting to be the best and face the best, and that includes Rhea. And they kind of give you like the "I'll see you down the road" type of nod to each other, as far as like, okay, like you're good, but I'm better, and I'll see you down the road when we test this. Many people thought that should have been the match at Mania, that Rhea should have chose Bianca, and that they should have been the women's match for the Raw Women's title. Which, I mean, it had an argument to be, especially after seeing Rhea and Charlotte. I mean, and what they didn't do as far as story and depth with Bianca and Asuka. So definitely a little nod to them there. As two of the younger two, I mean, Rhea's only 26. So, I mean, I know Bianca's not that much older than her, if at all. So it's one of those things where that women's division led by those two could be in good hands. I mean, it depends on who they build around them. You don't want to just have those two, but those two are definitely, going to be the measuring stick going around, into the next wave, group, generation of women stars, however you want to phrase it. Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan took on Dakota Kai and Io Sky. Damage control with no Bailey. Again, something that was brought up online was that Bailey had said bye, and that this was cryptic tweets on, what her future is. And then it said that she was pulled from multiple sources online, said that WWE pulled her based on the tweet. There's been no confirmation of that. There's been no no full blown like, oh yeah, that's what happened. But Raquel and Liv beat Dakota and Io Sky um, to get a shot at the tag belts, which I don't understand based on the fact that Rousey and Shayna Baszler won at WrestleMania. So why would you have a match that gives them a number one contender shot before Baszler and Rousey, unless that's just where you're headed for Backlash? Um, Again, The Miz comes out and talks about his interruptions from WrestleMania. And to this point, other than, people enjoying the Brock, interruption of the promo between Cody and Roman, there wasn't anything that made it feel like, oh, this is the Raw after WrestleMania. It's a big deal. Like, this is the Raw. If you don't watch any Raw all year long, this is the one you got to watch, because there's always going to be call ups from NXT. There's always going to be big returns or big debuts of new signees. And to that point, there hadn't been any. And it was, quite a bit of a letdown to that point as far as that went. So Miz comes out for his promo, talks about, all the surprises that he dealt with Pat McAfee, Shane McMahon, Snoop, all that stuff, and says it's not going to happen again. And then it does, and it's Matt Riddle. So Riddle is the returner who had been away for failing drug tests and going to rehab. So it was, a big deal, but it was also, one of those things where that's the first one. We're this deep into the show, and this is the first thing that's important. Gets into a scuffle with him, hits the bro Derek, and poses at the end. I mean, it was pretty straight to the point. And Miz, I mean, I know a lot of people, don't like Miz or don't like what he does, but the longevity he's had and the fact that he goes out there every night and takes what's given to him and tries to perform and make the best out of it, and still tries to put forth his best foot, so to speak. I mean, you can't ignore that. You can't ignore that he's the guy that they lean on in those moments of, hey, can you do this for us? Hey, can you do that for us? So it's good in that sense of seeing him get to do stuff, but at the same time, again, somebody who could be used better in a different light. And he's somebody who's very committed to his work, very very straight, to the point, as far as he wants to be there. He wants to be the guy that works. He's willing, he said it, and it shows that he's a guy that wants to, give me anything and I'll make it work, type of thing. And again, he showed it here. We get to the main event and the entrances, and everybody's in the ring. And as they introduce Cody, Brock turns around, picks him up, and hits him with the F5. And one of the things that I thought was important that may or may not have been missed is that it's not Roman and Solo and Heyman being like, "Oh, we got him," like how we set him up. It was genuine, like, wait a minute, what the hell just happened here? And you could see Roman hit Solo going, get out, like, we need to go, let's go, get out of here. So a nice little added, piece there if you're paying attention to what's going on as far as that goes. And for them, uh, according to Fightful Select online, this program or one-off, whatever it's going to be between Cody and Brock, was written in a month ago. So maybe not. I mean, that's only the one source that's had that to this point. So we'll see where this goes going forward. I mean, it's hard in the Cody sense that you go, where do you go after dealing with Roman? Well, Brock's another guy in that upper echelon of tippy top. But at the same time, did they miss an opportunity with Cody? Again, it comes down to, did they miss the opportunity? Because at one point you go, oh, well, if he overcomes Brock, then he looks stronger, and then he goes on to face Roman, and now you believe, like, oh, he beat Brock, so he could definitely beat Roman. It's just, he's got to do it without letting those guys get to him from the bloodline, or that Roman's got to do it straight up. But even when he wins it now, did they miss the window to go, oh, well, now this is it. This is it right here. That, we're happy that he has it, but it's not the big payoff of the return, the Rumble win, and the WrestleMania moment. So they may have missed an opportunity. And this beatdown by Brock seemingly went on for quite a while, and got to the point where you're like, okay, I get the point. And then he comes back again. I get the point, and he comes back and does it again. I mean, it's one of those things where it almost borderline gets uncomfortable to see somebody who's, not putting up a fight and just getting thrown around like a rag doll, like, as strong as Brock is. And maybe that was, the entire point. But based on the show as a whole, it was definitely disappointing as the Raw after WrestleMania. I think that, like I said, when you look at what Raw after WrestleMania is supposed to be, I mean, the crowd's rabid. It's a lot of people that are there for the entire weekend or that went to Mania and are coming to Raw also. So it's not a normal Monday Night Raw crowd. And then on top of that, you're looking at, hoping for surprises or hoping for a return or hoping for a debut. And the only day or return that you got was Matt Riddle. And the one surprise was Brock turning on Cody and beating the shit out of him. I felt like that was definitely a letdown. And when you look at how the show kind of was laid out and how it's been as of late versus this episode, it definitely looked more like a Vince McMahon episode of Raw and not a Triple H and creative uh, episode of Raw. And then as things start to come out online, there was, multiple people saying that Vince was all over this, that he was in charge, that they gave Triple H busy work, and that, Vince was asking for frantic rewrites, 10 and 15 minutes before the show went live. If that is in fact true, obviously we're not there. I'm not there to be able to say, oh yeah, no, that happened. If that is in fact true, then that's not a good sign for what people want. It, what has been going on hasn't been perfect as far as a whole show, but what they did with the bloodline and weaving that story between Raw and SmackDown and being able to set things up like having Cody win and Rhea win the respective Rumble matches and keeping those threads and the Rey and Dominic thing, then to have Edge and Balor kind of come back in and out and keep that going. They've had multiple things that have, you may not have loved each and every one of them, but you went, oh, they're trying. They're doing the storytelling, and the storyline makes sense to what they're doing. And so I'll sit through it. I'll watch some, of the filler and some of the stuff that I'm not a fan of if I get to see more of this. And it even got to the point where some of the stuff on SmackDown got to the point where the main event was not a match. It's a promo. It's Roman talking. It's Cody talking. So, I mean, they had people, reeled in. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about as far as missing an opportunity. You had that many people willing to watch when there wasn't even any physicality. It was just guys talking, and there was no big payoff. It was, oh, well, Roman, we're looking at Roman now to continue on and possibly be, looking at over 1,000 days as champion. Hey, look, that's great as far as what that looks like on paper and willing to say, hey, look, we stuck with this guy and this is long term and things of that nature. But if you don't look at Cody and the return that they set up and the way that they sold that to people, who's the guy that beats Roman at this point? There's nobody that they've invested in like that. Jay Uso, is it Jay Uso who is the guy that beats him? He's not that guy yet. He showed in his, couple matches with Roman that set him into the bloodline that he's, obviously gotten better and can hang and can do those things, but he's not an established main event singles guy. He's the tag star with his brother. And to sit here and think that they have somebody else when you're saying, well, it can't be Brock because they fought 100 times and Brock can't have a title match. Who does it? Orton? Is it Randy Orton whenever he comes back from, back surgery? Is that the guy that does it and breaks the streak? I mean, it just feels like for everything they invested into Cody, that somebody, whether it was Vince or somebody on the creative team with Hunter, was like, oh, well, the chase has been good, but it's more about the chase. It's not about the payoff. They bought the chase. And it's like, wait a minute, you got to give something here. Sometimes it is better to give people what they expect or what they want when you have them invested like this. This has been one of the crowning moments of WWE's resurgence in the last 9 months, 10 months, is that this bloodline storyline of building Sami and then, him losing in Montreal at Elimination Chamber. And now it's like, well, if Sami can't do it, then it's got to be Cody. And they haven't built anybody behind Cody because it's WrestleMania and he was the Royal Rumble winner. So now who do you go with? Who do you put in that spot? So definitely a show that was a letdown as far as it being the, supposed to be the crazy Raw after WrestleMania, and definitely looked like a show of the past that Vince would have his hands on versus Hunter. Now, is that true? It's only being reported online, but nobody's come out right and said it. So, and obviously I'm not there, so I can't say that it did or didn't happen, but it definitely looked like it. It got to the point where Tuesday, during commercial breaks at NXT, the crowd was chanting "Fire Vince." So, I mean, that's got to say something to the people at Endeavor that bought the WWE and that are working this deal out with them as far as who's in charge of what. Vince obviously still getting to be the chairman and the majority shareholder, carries a lot of weight, but they're the controlling ownership at 51%. So I think that their idea of their due diligence and who's running what and who's capable of what, and running it as a separate entity versus a joint entity sounds good on paper. But again, I asked this after episode 1. What does this mean going forward? What does this mean? Does this mean that Vince comes back into control? Because everybody's kind of over that as it is. And to see, even if this was slightly true, if he just had, a small amount to do with this episode of Raw, this is not a good sign going forward. So we'll have to see what happens as we go into SmackDown on Friday and see what happens there, as they've already announced that Hunter will also be opening the show on Friday to address the crowd. So we'll have to see if it's a similar, pep talk and thank you speech, or if it's going to be more, towards something else that's a little more, behind the curtain, so to speak. So as we move to AEW, AEW knew that this was going to be, WrestleMania week and coming out of WrestleMania weekend, so it had to be an important show. There was multiple title matches. There was multiple big moments that were supposed to be in this show. To kick the show off, Ricky Starks and Juice Robinson were supposed to be the opening match. They've built to this as Juice jumped Ricky Starks in recent weeks and wanted to wait until they were in Long Island, which, okay, like this match seemed like it could be a good opener. Ricky's a worker. He's, Juice is no slouch, and they're doing this thing with Juice where he's on a tear and he's amped up. So, but they didn't even get to the match. The guy, as far as Ricky goes, is getting in the ring. He's on the apron, and here comes Jay White running down, and they jump Ricky. Jay White is now officially a part of All Elite Wrestling, and was a free agent going into this after he left New Japan as a free agent in February. WWE felt like they went after him, but they couldn't get a hold of him. There was a lot of talk of that this week, that they couldn't figure out, how to get him to be WWE bound, and AEW seemed to be the place that he was probably headed. Don't know if anybody really expected it to be this week, but it was expected that he would be there. Unfortunately, the camera misses a lot of what this was. They were doing a wide shot of the crowd. They show Ricky on the apron, and you see the crowd in the background looking towards the stage, and then they cut to a wide shot, and you can't tell who's running down, and then they kind of cut up to him sprinting, and then it cuts away, so you can be like, oh, is that him, or is that not? I don't. And then next thing you know, he's on Ricky, and they're just kicking the shit out of Ricky, and you're like, wait, that is Jay White. Okay. Like, it wasn't, I felt like they could have waited a minute. They could have done it a little better and shot it to where you knew, oh shit, that's Jay White. They're now, possibilities of, they show the Bullet Club logo as part of Juice's entrance. They were doing the Bullet Club gun hand gesture with each other. Bullet Club has come a long way from the beginning, and now you have the Bucks, you have Kenny, you have Jay White, you have Juice Robinson, that are all either current, or previous Bullet Club members. So it's a possibility that they work something out with New Japan, and now that there's going to be, a Bullet Club in AEW, because they're definitely using the logo and the hand gestures. And today on Instagram, Jay White posted BC Black and Gold, which would be Bullet Club Black and Gold as in AEW. So we'll have to see how that goes. Cool to see Jay White there. We'll see what he does. Hopefully they give him an opportunity to give him some stuff to sink his teeth into and get after it. And, the dude's definitely an excellent worker. He's definitely somebody who can be a main event guy for them and be a star right away. When AEW last saw him was at Forbidden Door last summer, when he was at that time the IWGP heavyweight champion. So, a world champion and star elsewhere could probably, and known for that, so could possibly be somebody who's a major factor for them going forward if it's handled correctly. They show Jericho in the back cutting a promo about Adam Cole and Danny Garcia's match and how Cole beat him and was disrespectful and he didn't like it. Keith Lee cuts into the picture and sets up a match for Lee versus Jericho next week. If Jericho's willing to work, it could be fun. I mean, Keith Lee can go. Again, this with AEW, this is how do you handle it? Just like Jay White coming in, how are you going to handle it? How are you going to handle Keith Lee? I mean, they had something with him and Swerve, and then they split Swerve and him, and then he just went away and hasn't really done anything much of substance since then. They followed this with a trios title match, House of Black versus Best Friends in Orange Cassidy. Uh, they do the House of Black entrance, and then for the Best Friends in Orange Cassidy, Trent's mom Sue drives in the minivan, which you may, if you paid attention to AEW during the earlier time of the pandemic and the early days at Daly's place, Sue brought the Best Friends in when they fought Santana and Ortiz in a street fight. So she's been on the show before. It's funny. It's a nice little like, oh, that's hilarious spot. But I mean, for Best Friends, it's hard to get behind them as somebody who watches both shows. And I will say this, when AEW started, I was super pro AEW. I was just like everybody else who was about the elite as far as the Bucks, Kenny and Cody and Hangman and those guys, being an alternative to WWE and committing to being something different and committing to wrestling as a whole. And what that is to many people, as far as, it can be many things. It can be a lucha style. It can be more of a traditional style. It can be a catch as catch can style. There's many different things that it can be, but it just feels like they've deviated from that idea originally, and now it's just whatever the Bucks and Kenny or Chris Jericho, for that matter, as it's been stated that he does a lot of his own stuff and has a lot of pull as far as bending Tony Khan's ear. That it's just gotten to, okay, well, we'll just go ahead and have all these people originally that were our friends and we'll see what we can do. But then at the same time, it becomes, okay, well, what are you going to do with them? And then when you get people in there that are names from other places that people recognize or things of that nature, like the original idea was there's a lot of names that people didn't recognize fully. And those people would get notoriety based on the people that did have names that would tune in. And now as people have gotten to know some of these people and, some of these other names from other companies have come in, some of these people have either just not been used or they're not been seen. And unless they're doing an independent show, which isn't on national television, and the Best Friends kind of fall into that like not used, don't see category other than walking out with Orange Cassidy. Right now, Orange Cassidy has more, TV time than the Best Friends. And Trent's not a bad worker at all. I don't dislike, Chuck Taylor as far as, him working with Trent and being part of the Best Friends tag team. But it's like, all he does is just stand there. He doesn't look like he's in shape. Trent at least looks like he's in shape. Looks like when he does fight, he is trying. And unless Chuck Taylor's hurt, I don't see really a point to keep him around. I mean, you can have Trent and Orange Cassidy be tag teams if that's what you want to do with Trent, and or have Trent be a singles guy. I mean, there's definitely some room to run with that, but it just seems like they just stuck, whoever in with House of Black, and we're like, here you go, and they beat him, and it was over. There's not a whole lot of trios teams in AEW, so they're going to be in a spot here pretty soon where who do you work with? Are you just building teams to throw into the division, or are you going to have some actual teams? House of Black is a stable that is that all the time. The Bucks and Kenny, they're not a regular stable as far as they compete more as a tag team and an individual than as a trio. They just do the trio stuff to offset seeing them so much in those individual tag team matches or individual singles matches. Outside of that, who do you have? Who's in a stable that you can throw with them? Dark Order, Blackpool Combat Club. It doesn't seem like either one of those sides are interested in dealing with the trios titles. So I think they the idea of the trios titles sounded good, and it gave Kenny and the Bucks something to do that they had been wanting to do that they got to do before, and that's work together like that. And on paper, it sounded great, but what's next? What do you do with it? Because now these titles are just sitting with the House of Black, and they're just waiting to find out who's next. And if you're just going to keep throwing teams or three people together, I just don't see where it has any weight to carry with those titles. The next thing up was a promo between Christian and who appeared to be Luchasaurus. They said nothing. They reminded everybody that nobody has seen Christian since his essentially buried alive match. They called it a final burial match with Jungle Boy at Revolution. He said nothing. They just showed him, and then a figure that looked like Luchasaurus with a new piece of attire in the background in the silhouette. So we'll have to see what happens there. Jamie Hayter versus Riho in another championship match. I don't hate Riho at all. I mean, she was good for the early on stages of it. It gave the David versus Goliath, basic idea for a lot of things early on in AEW's women division with Nyla Rose and her. But now, when you have girls like Jamie Hayter and you have somebody like a Saraya who's taller, bigger, has more, and this is not a knock on weight, just more meat on the bone in general, that look like grown-ups, it's hard to kind of think like, oh, well, I could see Riho beating her. Her and Jamie Hayter fighting, it just seemed pretty much like, okay, they're going to do the same thing they always do with Riho. Let her fight from underneath. She's, undersized. And did anybody really believe that Riho was going to catch her slipping? Especially with how they're doing things with the outcast of Ruby Soho, Saraya, and Toni Storm. Again, Toni Storm even, who's not super tall, but is much bigger than Riho. I mean, I don't hate her. She's works hard, but it just, which one of these is not like the other? It doesn't seem to fit in what you want when you want to take women's wrestling and go, okay, look, we're good here, but this is bridging that gap. Hikaru Shida's not here, nowhere to be seen after having this whole back and forth confliction with the Outcast. So they just kind of let that die, and then she hasn't really been around at all. So, again, this is you're going to see a reoccurring theme right now with AEW where they kind of change things on a whim, where there doesn't seem to be a real general direction. It's just a lot of matches and not a lot of storytelling, or a lot of loose ends and not a whole lot of fluidity to what's going on, and weaving, so to speak, of the things that are going on that you're seeing on TV. After Hayter wins with her ripcord clothesline, they cut to a promo with the Outcasts, which is Ruby Soho, Toni Storm, and Saraya. And they talk about how one of the three are going to wind up being the women's champion, that they're going to take the title from Hayter, and that they're united in this, that they just don't want Hayter to have the title. Then they show a video package of MJF Day from Long Island from the day before. And MJF is from Long Island, so the crowd's very pro them. And for everything that MJF has done in AEW, one of the things that people notoriously shit on is his musical deal with Chris Jericho when they did the Inner Circle deal. And I agree. I didn't like it. But then they have him bring it out here, and he's singing, and it's MJF Day, so it's important. And I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a shot if this is going to go somewhere or mean something important. But it just wound up being him talking, a city official talking, and talking about how great he is. And then it just set up Jungle Boy at the end to wind up being one of the crew members in the band that he sang with, and he jumps him. I just felt that it was a lot of time given to that segment. It was a lot of time to do something that didn't take that long. And they had on this show, they had Jungle Boy, they have Sami after this in a match with Commander, and no Darby Allin. So out of the guys that he's looking at that are supposed to be the quote unquote pillars and, want a world title shot, the guy who is the most, famous of those three isn't even on the show. So again, the direction of what this is, like, I get you want to establish all three guys as, threats or important as a pillar, but the guy who is most over in this and is a multiple-time TNT champion, he's not even anywhere near it. I just, to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They go to Sami versus Commander. Sami winds up beating him. This was only his second match. I don't know a whole lot about him. He was on the Ring of Honor card against Hilo de Vikino. But this is a different dude in the sense that he's a masked wrestler, works a lucha style. And again, second match, don't know a whole lot about him, but they had Sami beat him with his finish. And then this is something that, as an alternative to what's going on in WWE, they don't have somebody like they used to that stood in the ring and did your interview and held your mic for you. Now over here, they bring Tony Schiavone to the ring, and every single person, minus maybe a handful, take the damn mic out of his hand, and then he's got to either take off to the corner or jump out of the ring completely because this person wants to just talk on their own and can't stand still or doesn't know how to do a damn interview with somebody holding the mic to their face. Like, it's an important piece that it separates things. It's a small thing. It's a detail that's different. And yet, again, it's like, well, no, I'm going to do it how I would do it in front of 50 people, 100 people at an indie show, 1,000 people, whatever it is, instead of doing it how it can look different and make an impact on national television. I get the freedom that AEW has for a lot of these guys, and it's a lot of what makes their eyes get big when they want to go sign there. I understand that, but at the same time, there's got to be some sort of structure that's not being had. Whether it's, hey, look, we need to cut down on this type of stuff, or we need to keep certain details important and in line. It just seems like currently it's a free for all, and I would say that it's borderline going to cause AEW into a free fall based on, depending on what WWE does and based on what they've done in the last 10 months. After the Sami beating Commander, he takes the mic from Tony, cuts a promo about MJF, when they fought and how Sean Spears interfered, and he's a pillar and vows to become champion. So again, another guy that was a part of the Jack Perry, Darby Allin, Sammy Guevara 3 that won a shot at Double or Nothing, and this is his statement as to why he's going to be champion. They set up Hook versus Ethan Page. This Ethan Page Matt Hardy thing has been going on off and on. It's been on Rampage and a little bit on Dynamite, and including Stokely Hathaway in the Firm situation. This time they get Ethan Page in there with Hook for the FTW title. Matt Hardy winds up hitting Ethan Page with the title belt, and Hook gets him in his submission, the Red Rum, and it's over. I like Hook. I do. I think he's got a boatload of potential and that there's a lot going on for him. But if you're looking apples to apples with him and Dominic Mysterio, I mean, Dominic right now is just out front by leaps and bounds for the way that they're using him. And maybe that's not Hook's fault. Maybe the experience factor will help as far as house shows go when they continue to run the house show schedule that they're planning. But right now, it just seems like the way that Dom's being used and what he's getting to learn in a front row seat of working with his dad and working with vets like Priest and Balor, and even Rhea Ripley, even being young, like I'm sure he's learning a boatload from her, that Hook doesn't have that. And Hook's not getting that opportunity. So, at least not from what it looks like. So, again, good for Hook. But, again, where do you go? The FTW belt doesn't do anything. If you took it off of him, nobody would give a shit. It'd still be the guy that you're like, oh, yeah, like, I like him. So, or he's cool. Like, he's just somebody on the show. I like him. He's cool. So, again, loose ends and direction. The announcement that Tony Khan had, which was a big announcement, is that AEW, instead of doing all out, is going to do an all in, which, if you know what all in is, it's the idea that gave Tony the confidence to pull the trigger on building AEW with the elite and the executive vice president and Chris Jericho. It was the original wrestler funded show that was contributed to by Ring of Honor, New Japan, and several others as far as people behind the scenes. So now they're using the name and they're going to London to Wembley Stadium. That's a huge stadium depending on how they lay it out. I know that there's, at times for concerts that it has been laid out as 80,000. I doubt that they do that. But at the same time, I do think that they could, if this is their debut and they book the show correctly, then they could have a huge show. How many? I don't know. I mean, I would say it's a success if they have anywhere from 15 to 20,000, in London, because it's different. It's not here. It's different. And I know he has a presence. The Cons have a presence based on them owning a soccer or football team, however you want to name them, over there. So hopefully that brings something to them. They have Nigel McGuinness there now, who is a new hire to AEW and an asset to there, for sure, with experience and hopefully can help with some of the commentary stuff. They followed that up with the Blackpool Combat Club beating up some no-name guys in a squash. Before the bell even started, they beat the shit out of them and made it quick. Danielson jumps in the ring and cuts a promo about how everybody else are amateurs. Everybody, including, and even makes a comment that everything on TV this week showed him that they're the only professional wrestlers and that everybody else is an amateur. And then Hangman comes out and they beat the shit out of Hangman. And Danielson talks about teaching his kids how to fix things, including fixing their house, and pulls a screwdriver out of his jacket. Now, for those of you who don't know, there's been a lot of criticism because there was a screwdriver used in Hangman's match, or Texas Death Match, if you want to call it that, with Moxley from Revolution. And part of the deal about being a bad guy is doing things that it's going to piss people off or get under people's skin. And Danielson talking about being a professional wrestler and then using a screwdriver. If you're a wrestling purist or traditionalist, that's going to drive you insane. So that's the point. And so, they get Hangman, they hit him with a screwdriver, and they talk about how everybody's amateurs, and he calls him an amateur. And this time the Dark Order doesn't come save him. So now he just gets his ass kicked and stuck with a screwdriver. The main event was FTR versus the Guns, or, if you know them as Billy Gunn's kids, Austin and Colton Gunn. People may know them as the Ass Boys, thanks to Danhausen. And FTR's deal was that it was the titles versus their careers. If you know anything about FTR or have been following them or Dax Hardwood's podcast, you know that their contracts were up in a matter of weeks. They'd been taking time off, and then they came back after Revolution and picked up the titles like, okay, we're going to challenge you guys. Did a little small build for it and built to this match. So this is the third title match of this show. And the idea on this was the outcome being, okay, are they staying or are they going? Because if they're winning, then they're probably staying. And if they're going, then they're probably going to lose. So a good match. I mean, FTR doing what they always do. There's a lot of potential with the Guns. There really is. They're very young. They're very new to what this is, but they seem to be two guys who want to know how to do this right and want to do it the right way overall. So they're learning as they go. But again, this is going to be a situation with how do you handle them? Do you give them people like FTR and tag teams to work with that have a lot of experience, or do you give them guys that are still new also? So it'll be interesting to see what happens after this. But FTR picks up the win. And then as the show is going off the air and they hit the streamers for the second week in a row, they announced that FTR is not going anywhere and they're staying. So to me, I wouldn't have said it on air. I would have left it until after the show was over and then had it out on social media like, hey, we're staying. Or you could even worded it as, having FTR tweet out like, hey, look, we won the tag belts. And after that, Tony Khan and ourselves sat down and ironed out the details of what we had been asking for. And he was willing to give it to us, make it part of the whole deal. But they didn't do that. They just announced, oh, they're staying. So cool. Good for them, especially if the Vince McMahon thing is true. Then good for them for staying and doing something, because they, despite everything that AEW has struggled with when it comes to booking them and missing huge fucking opportunities after the Briscoe situation, they've found a way to get over anyway. So good for them. Hopefully they got paid a generous amount of money and get to enjoy at least that part of the show. I've heard this said before on Jim Cornette's podcast that if you could put the storytelling of WWE in with some of the matches of AEW, then you would have a complete show. Right now, it just seems like for everything that AEW was supposed to be, it's not, because there's no fluidity. It's just like, I want this guy to fight this guy. Whereas on WWE side, you got the same guys fighting over and over again in a circle. So I feel like that's valid. That if you could put these pieces together or get somebody in AEW to help get this shit situated to where they can work with people for programs. I know it's not easy. Doing a pay-per-view every 3 months instead of every month to build towards something is not easy, because you got to give some things on television, and that's understood. But at the same time, it's so often on hot and cold. I mean, for all the bitching and moaning that was done about how WWE books people and how they start people when Vince was running the show before he got pulled away, and before AEW became what it is now, everybody was like, "Oh, they're just mishandled. They don't go there. You're going to get mishandled." I don't know if you go to AEW, and if you don't already have a name and are established, that even that is going to get you the best of the best. Because if you look at FTR, they were somebody who was huge over. They go out and win the tag titles of every single company but the one that they're under contract with. Then on top of that, they go out and put on a clinic, a flat out clinic of tag team matches with Jay and Mark Briscoe. Rest in peace, Jay Briscoe. And they still don't put the titles on them. They still don't book them on television. They just left them off. And I've heard this before of, oh, well, we want to do an off-season thing. We want to do something where they kind of rotate in and out. Okay, then do the program with them and build to the pay-per-view, and then take them off for a little while. And then kind of interweave them with different stuff if you want to during the time that they're off, by not putting them in major matches or a storyline. They have continued to sign people, and even with Ring of Honor now, it's almost like the roster is too big. There's too many people. They're trying to serve too many masters and too many, chiefs, not enough Indians, so to speak. That you have so many people you're trying to get to be a part of the show. There's so many people that you're trying to get involved in some sort of feud or fight. But there's so many things going on at once that there's nothing there. If you're doing everything, then you're doing nothing. You got to be able to weed some of this shit out and slow it down. You can have good matches. Look, that was the one thing that when they started this company, that you look at WCW, they opened Monday Night Nitro with the Luchadors. And they would start those matches or those shows with those matches, and those guys would draw you in, and then you'd get the names, then you'd get the famous people. Or it'd start with a promo of the people that you loved, and then you stayed for the match because it was high intensity, it was fast paced, it was different than everything else that was on the show. AEW has the opportunity to do that, especially capable with a lot of the wrestlers and performers that they have on that roster. But it's almost like they refuse. That it's just like, well, we just want good matches. That's what we want, is we want good matches. It's not about the storytelling. Okay, but it is sometimes. Does it have to be all the time? No, not at all. Does it have to be even the majority of the time? No, it's when it calls for it and it makes sense. Like right now, you're trying to do this storyline of the Pillars or this feud with the Pillars, and Darby Allin wasn't even on this show. Like I said, he's the most over guy you have in that, next to the champion, and he's not even on the fucking show. Like, what are you doing here that's going to be different? They've had multiple times where MJF has put stipulations on somebody to get to him. That's happened multiple times now, where that's almost not special if they do it a third time. Then you have, okay, what are you building with the Blackpool Combat Club? I like Danielson as a heel. I like him as a bad guy. And talking about how Kenny Omega's, everything that's wrong with pro wrestling, and calling Hangman an amateur. I dig it. I do. But where does this go? Blood and guts again? Stadium Stampede or Anarchy in the Arena type match? That's what got Danielson put out last time. So there's, some things that it looks like there's an effort there, but it's like, get behind them and regulate some of these ideas to go, look, we can do that, but let's tweak it. And that some of that may very well be happening, but to sit here and say that AEW is being booked better than WWE currently, I can't say that it is. There's enough storytelling in WWE, as the prime example with the Bloodline, that if you get people invested, they'll hang around. And it's not easy, and they won't always do it, especially with the way that content is consumed now, where everybody is like, oh, well, I can just record it and watch it later. I'll catch the clips on YouTube or wherever you on Instagram, on, stories and reels. there is a very real deal here that if you don't have people invested, it's a flyby, like, oh, that happened? All right, cool. I'll check that out later. And then you don't get to it because you're not invested in it. So I really think that with this, on the show, it literally looked with the number of things that went on that they could have thinned that out and gave people more appropriate time and could have sit here and went, okay, look, this match can have some more time, or we can do a video package here instead of having this whole situation. Like the MJF thing. I like MJF. I like that he's the world champion right now. And I like the singing at the beginning. But did you have to do the whole runaround with the city official and everything else after showing the video package that he had already done that yesterday, and then have Jungle Boy wearing a mask and a hood and a hat and all that business, and then jump him? There's a simpler way to do that. And sometimes less is more. Sometimes it's okay to keep it simple because simple is good enough to get people invested. If you overconvolute something, if you overthink something, then you're going to put yourself in a spot where you're just going to lose people because it's like, there's too much going on here for me. I'd rather not, with the way that things are consumed nowadays. And I get it. Like I said, there's got to be, pop a rating, got to get something for, Warner Brothers Discovery. Understood. But you can get those things if you take your time and look at it as like, okay, looking at, the show layout from here, the Ricky Starks and Juice Robinson with the Jay White debut. Okay. Jay White debut. Cool. Not a problem with the idea of what they were doing, but did they have to run him out as soon as the music cut off? No. Slow that down. Give it a little more time to breathe. Bring Jay White in. Let him, maybe even let him say something. The thing with Jericho, the promo for him and Keith Lee, okay, that gives you something to get to next week. I get it. The trios match with House of Black. Again, Orange Cassidy's defending the international title every week or every other week, and you just throw the best friends in like, hey, that's his friend, so they get a title shot. Like, wait a minute. The House of Black's been over here putting in work as a trio to try and go ahead and get after those titles. What have the best friends done? Chuck Taylor hasn't been on TV in months. Again, no direction, loose ends. So then you go to the Christian and Luchasaurus silent promo. Okay, video package. They didn't do anything in person, so it's not something that took up a lot of time or, took up space. Cool, no problem with that. Hayter and Riho for the women's title. Again, Riho, why are you getting a title match? Who did you beat? What's been going on? There's no more of these title eliminators. There's no more of this reason. And Britt Baker, being somebody who's on Front Street for All Access, you would think that they would have her out in the ring right now. Unless she's hurt and her back situation is part of the problem where she's sitting out, she should be out there. And the story that they had built in was that Hayter was her lackey. And now, if you're the boss that you say you are and that you're the queen, then why are you not mad that the person that was supposed to be your right-hand person took your spot at the top? That was built in. And I know she said it like, in an interview, hey, I'm not mad at her. She's, I'm happy for her and I want to support her too. That's cool if this leads to you turning and going, hey, well, I want to compete for the women's championship too. And there's not two belts. There's only one. So I'm going after you. I'll do what I got to do to get there. People like Hayter. Clearly, Baker is better as a heel. So let her be a heel and let Hayter soak up being a good guy as a babyface. I just feel like there's a lot of this that can be resolved with a little less rush and a little less what seems to be, for lack of a better phrase, spastic booking. So we'll see how it goes. As I said, this is going to be a weekly thing every Wednesday night, possibly Thursday, depending on time constraints. So we'll say for sure Thursday. The episodes will be posted reviewing Monday Night Raw and AEW Dynamite. The next episode, for episode 3, you will hear us talking about Friday Night SmackDown, and we will talk a little bit more in depth about what's going on and expand about some of these views or some of these things that we possibly could be in store for, and possibly ideas that we have, as I said before, as we armchair book what's going on here. So with that being said, once again, you can find us on YouTube here shortly as we are working on that channel now. We're on Spotify. If you're listening to us on Spotify, thank you. Give us a follow. Make sure that you tell your friends to follow us. And we are also on Riverside FM if you're looking for us there. And with that in mind, make sure you go follow us on Instagram at grabaholdpodcast _ after every word. And we will see you coming up this Saturday.